The PlayStation 5 is 4 years old, and we can assume halfway through its life since most generations last about 8. What started with a defiant rallying cry that the Blue brand believes in generations quickly turned into a story of cross-gen titles, remakes, ballooning budgets, and games as a service titles, and fans are getting to be a bit restless. 4 years in, does the PS5 have games? Can it hold a candle to the PS4 4 years in? Or is the latest Sony machine just a disappointment? Let's dive in. November 2020 saw the release of the PlayStation 5, the follow-up to the record-breaking PlayStation 4, which many looked at as the second coming of the PS2. The PS5 had a lot going for it, with super hot momentum leading up to its launch. You had some of the best reviewed games of the year releasing on PlayStation 4 from Sony first party, with Ghost of Tsushima and The Last of Us Part 2, plus third-party exclusives like Final Fantasy VII Remake. The PS4 was looking to end its run triumphantly as Xbox was pivoting to an ecosystem desperate for anyone to buy in anywhere and just subscribe to Game Pass. A huge talking point with Xbox was Play Anywhere, smart delivery, and a promise of 2 years of cross-generation support for their first-party titles across Xbox One in addition to launching on Series S and X. PlayStation, on the other hand, was in staunch opposition, claiming they believed in generations, then proceeded to do exactly what Xbox did in a much sloppier and more confusing way. In hindsight, it's pretty funny to look at the PS5 launch window because the titles released then largely set the tone for what this generation would be for the Blue brand. You have a cross-generation release with Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales, a remake of a revolutionary PS3 game with Demon's Souls, and a live service title that failed immediately in Destruction All-Stars. A joke you'll regularly see online has been brought back since the days of the PS3, stating, PlayStation 5 doesn't have any games, or PS5 has no games. And it's objectively funny because while there are obviously hundreds of great games playable on the PS5, in a certain respect, there is a kernel of truth to it, and I think is why so many people get mad when they see that. Maybe if we extend it to PS5 has no games compared to the PS4, people won't get angry? Or maybe they will. The PlayStation strategy this generation has been very interesting to watch unfold because it, similar to Xbox, is largely responding to the state of the industry and console sales plateauing, all while games get more expensive to make across longer periods of time. In the end, both gaming giants have needed to look beyond their current console to keep growing. We also can't ignore they hung on to the record-breaking PS4 for 2 of the 4 years the PS5 has been on shelves. So let's look at the PS5 library so far and see if it's actually got something going for it after 4 years. For the sake of this video not being a lot longer, we're going to be mainly looking at first-party titles or things published by PlayStation. What I won't be including is PlayStation VR 2 games, because that is an entirely separate sub-ecosystem that you need to invest in. It's very, very separate, so let's go. Starting with the big third-party deals that have maintained their PlayStation 5 exclusivity after these first 4 years. They all launched in 2024, and they are Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Stellar Blade, and Rise of the Ronin. It's pretty safe to assume all of these are coming to PC sooner or later based on developer comments, or previous PlayStation 5 third-party deals coming to PC, like Final Fantasy XVI. The main point of interest here to me is how PlayStation focuses on these genres specifically when courting third-party titles this generation. Final Fantasy has the lineage, obviously, but it and these other 2 titles largely fit in with what sold well on the PlayStation 4. The PlayStation audience has grown to expect third-person character action RPG-light experiences, so if timelines expanding means the first-party teams can deliver those games less often, it makes sense that they would scoop games like these to fill their calendar. But speaking of first-party, Astro's Playroom. I'd argue this is the first PS5 game, seeing as it's a pack-in on every console they sell and what many people played first when booting up the console when it launched in 2020. This is a pretty great look at the gimmick features of the PlayStation 5, mainly found in the DualSense, but also showcasing fast loading times. And as a fan of Rescue Mission for the PlayStation VR, I think this is a wonderful introduction to what Team Asobi, formerly Japan Studio, is capable of. Next up is Demon's Souls, which I'd argue is the premier launch title of the PS5 in 2020, mainly due to the fact that it only released on the PS5 and is somehow still only playable on the PlayStation 5. This remake of the PS3 progenitor to Elden Ring was a lot of folks' first experience with a Souls title, and I think in hindsight again, telling of what this generation would have in store. Moving ahead to 2021, the next PS5 exclusive is Destruction All-Stars. Returnal is up next, and this one made some waves. Housemarque, famous for Resogun on the PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Vita, came in swinging with a bold roguelike third-person bullet hell, previously mentioning that they believed arcade-type games were straight up dead. Housemarque was able to blend their arcadey roots with modern PlayStation's cinematic third-person elements, and it hit for a lot of people, with some saying it was the best game of the year of release. This would later hit PC. Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. It's like you're playing a Pixar movie. Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is another entry in the long-running Ratchet series, and was true to what the series has become across every generation since it began on the PlayStation 2. Now with super fast load times, finding itself as a focal point for showcasing what the PS5 could offer in terms of next-gen experiences, and this game would also hit PC. 2022 arrived and was largely anchored around PlayStation 4 cross-gen titles like Gran Turismo 7, Horizon Forbidden West, and God of War Ragnarok. So the only real true PS5 game this year was another remake of an important PS3 game. The Last of Us Part 1 was met with a whole lot of controversy when it was announced and in the run-up to its launch. A lot of drama surrounding a full $70 price tag and the necessity of a game from less than 10 years prior getting a remake filled that summer season. But today, I think it's more interesting looking at it within the context of PlayStation trying to expand their reach and profits beyond the PlayStation 5. It would later come to PC. We're already at 2023, and as of right now, we've got our first game since the launch of the PS5 in 2020 that is still only playable on a PlayStation 5, with Marvel's Spider-Man 2. The game will be coming to PC in January, but right now it's still a celebrated showcase of what the PlayStation 5 is technically capable of. People throw a lot of rightful praise at Insomniac for carrying this generation in terms of both quality and quantity of releases 4 years in, especially if you include the cross-gen releases of Marvel's Spider-Man Miles Morales and the remaster of the PS4 game Marvel's Spider-Man. It's hard to argue they really are putting in the work. Believe it or not, we have already reached 2024. The year was kicked off with Helldivers 2, which was an unexpected cultural phenomenon. This was actually the first day-and-day release on PlayStation 5 and PC for a PlayStation-published game. Helldivers 2 is also the fastest-selling PlayStation exclusive of all time, entirely due to how well it's sold on PC. If you exclude PC sales, I'm pretty sure it doesn't even crack the top 25 on that list. This is the real fascinating one because it was the first truly successful PC release of a PlayStation title, at least anywhere near this degree. And it may as well have been a brand new IP because nobody knew it. The vast majority of players of this game knew about Helldivers. We see PlayStation pillars like Horizon or Ghost of Tsushima, even God of War hit PC, and struggle to be breakout hits on that market years after their initial release. So many have even questioned if the success of this day-and-day launch will lead to more down the line. Similar to Helldivers, Concord released on PS5 and PC in August. I'm mentioning it here for historical purposes because the game has been delisted and the studio has been shut down. And lastly, we reach Astrobot, once again another true PS5 exclusive, and a real celebration of PlayStation history. Yes, it's full of cameos, references, and a fair bit of navel-gazing, but it's legitimately an incredibly polished 3D platformer, which is hard to come by on this scale outside of the Nintendo Switch. So we're caught up, and if you want to be reductive, after 4 years, the only games that you absolutely need a PS5 to play are Astro's Playroom, Demon's Souls, Destruction All-Stars, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 until January, and Astrobot. For sure, some high-quality titles, and when you add in the PC releases like Returnal, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, The Last of Us Part 1, and Helldivers 2, you got a pretty strong lineup of games. So how does that stack up to the PS4 after 4 years? Oh. After 4 years, the PS4 had some really strong third-party exclusives, many of which they published and stayed on the console exclusively in this 4-year time frame. Now, since a lot of these have reached out, but putting the 4-year qualifier on, we're looking at No Man's Sky, Street Fighter V, Nier Automata, Persona 5, Neo, and Yakuza 0. First party-wise, 4 years in, the PS4 had Killzone Shadowfall and Knack, Infamous Second Son, Infamous First Light, Drive Club, SingStar, Super Stardust Ultra, The Order 1886, which shout out for a second. We don't talk about The Order 1886 enough. Bloodborne, Until Dawn, Ratchet & Clank, the remake from 2016, Alienation, Uncharted 4, Bound, The Last Guardian, Gravity Rush 2, Horizon Zero Dawn, MLB The Show 2017, Matterfall, Uncharted The Lost Legacy, Everybody's Golf, Knack 2, and Gran Turismo Sport. I'm not saying nothing. In terms of the sheer number of titles and variety especially, the PS4 still has a strong advantage. Now, the reasoning for this difference is multifaceted. It for sure includes the fact that the console launched into a global pandemic, but the expectations and budgets for PlayStation titles have also ballooned significantly, as we learned from the 2023 Insomniac leaks, likely due to the reputation the brand cultivated in the PS4 since 2013 onward. Now, the PS5 inherited a lot of that tail end success of the PlayStation 4, thanks to PS4 games also launching on the PS5, which allowed for better frame rates and resolution. Regarding release frequency since the console launched though, when we consider the amount of budget and resources the company invested into the live service incubation under Jim Ryan, who at one point was aiming for half their output by the mid-2020s to be live service games, even if they get canceled and they decide to stop doing that, like The Last of Us did, it's not like that team magically has a single-player game ready for release in its place. So of course, there's going to be gaps if all of those projects are struggling or just straight up getting canceled. The transition to new leadership, now under Herman Hulst and Hideaki Nishino, is why we see PlayStation continuing to expand their presence on PC, with a launcher and trophy support, and why they want PSN accounts to play PC releases like God of War Ragnarok on Steam. All that in mind, for me at least, I can understand where the PS5 has no games joke comes from. But if we're being serious, it's not a no games problem. There's games to play in abundance. It's an identity problem. Going back to that list of PS5 only games, and I'm including the ones with PC ports, PS3 remakes, or games that were all-time classics, really important from an earlier time that people loved already. Games that rely on the PlayStation lineage, failed live service games, Marvel games, and then finally you have the Helldivers and Returnal category, which includes Helldivers 2 and Returnal. The best way to refer to this one is maybe just like the new IP or the risks category, but like Helldivers being a sequel messes that up, even though it's that's the context, right? It's basically the new IP category, the new successful risks, okay? Now, 2 of those categories rely on older ideas and nostalgia for past PlayStation consoles. One category is just the botched experiments. Marvel Games has now become a core pillar of the PlayStation identity as a brand, and the final category is the truly fresh PS5 original titles and what you have to point to as what defines the PS5 or what separates it from the PlayStation 4. Now, boiling all of this down is not to say any of this is bad, because again, for the most part, all of these games are really well received and great releases overall. But when we look at what the PS5 specifically has provided to players halfway through its life, I mean, I feel like it's fair to call it a bit disappointing so far. When 4 years into the PS4, you have a lot of experimental small releases, big franchises like Uncharted and Infamous with multiple entries, the nostalgia play with Ratchet and Clank, and a big new swing on Horizon after Guerrilla already shipped a Killzone game. Yeah, the PS5 is less varied at the very least. Looking ahead, 2025 is shaping up to be another interesting year with sequels to some of the most beloved games of the PS4 in Ghost of Yotei and Death Stranding 2. We're also supposedly getting Marathon in 2025, which hopefully can fall into the Helldivers and Returnal camp. If all that ends up releasing, 2025 is looking to be another year of strong releases for the console, and some of those will likely be some of the best games on the console in its entire library. To those that want to see PlayStation embrace something new, or take a stab at something that felt as fresh as Bloodborne or Horizon did, you'll likely have to keep waiting to see what's new from a studio like Housemarque, Cory Barlog's next game at Santa Monica, or whatever Bluepoint is doing, since word is they're doing an original title next. Or it was some kind of weird original content, like some people are like, oh, an Atreus game could still qualify under what they said, so like, we'll see. In a lot of ways, especially in the wake of the PlayStation 5 Pro just releasing, this generation, I feel, is largely defined by the PlayStation 4 and iterating on that. But is that a disappointment? The PS4 is arguably one of the strongest consoles in gaming history. Again, it's largely dependent on the person answering this question, but by PlayStation's own metric of believing in generations, I'd say, yeah, they kind of didn't deliver on that. But obviously those comments were seemingly just made as jabs against the competition, and a whole lot has changed in the games industry, entertainment industry, and the world since 2020. So what do you think of the PlayStation 5 4 years into its life? Are you ready to pick up a PS5 Pro? Are you excited about what the company has releasing in 2025? Or are you one of the rare individuals that have made the leap from console to PC gaming? Be sure to let us know. And as always, if you stuck around, thank you so much, and stay tuned to Game Rant for more.